here is a statistic or a number that we should be concerned by, and this is a number that's been put out by UN Women as part of an op-ed that they wrote on promoting equity in this field of technology. Women occupy only 35% students, that is, in STEM education today, and women hold less than 1/3 of positions in technology and 22% of the present jobs in AI, if that is going to be the future, are held by women today. So there is a long distance to cover. There is a long road ahead. Without further ado, Srimati, let me start by asking you, as I pointed out, over 2 decades of experience in the tech world, you're one of the few women in a leadership role in a technology company here in India. Of course, it happens to be a multinational company operating globally at this point in time. What do you believe, in your experience, have been the big challenges? What has changed? What hasn't?
Yeah, I think this is one question which we have been asking for the last 20 years, which is good. And it's important to reinforce what we have learned, what we are unlearning, and trying to also discover every day. Number one, I think I'm sure all of them who are in academia here would say that 50% of the students who are coming into engineering schools or any grad schools in India are young women, and they aspire to learn and grow. They do very well with graduation, but then it's somewhere, because of the life inflection points, they just fall out, right? Which is still a major problem. Mm-hmm. So let me just, from the technology perspective, and everybody is worried about ChatGPT and stuff like that. In my view, we don't need to worry about it, because in order to make ChatGPT say the right things, you still need intelligent minds, right?
Yes.
So we will all exist. Let me just take back a minute and go back to years of anthropology. In my view, if men are supposed to be hunters and gatherers, as per sociology, I think the women were the first engineers. It's my hypothesis. Because the men gather something, hunt something, and bring home. Who started the fire at home must be the women. The first metallurgist must be the women. She built houses, so she should have been the first civil engineer.
Yeah.
And she would be the first one to decide what to do with the herbs that were gathered, either to make medicine or to make anything out of it. So my view is all the biotech, biomedical, civil engineering, construction engineering, how to even start the fire and who even discovered the wheel, in my view, should have been women, right? But then later we did lose out because we all moved into an agrarian society. That's number one. Having said that, is now at this juncture, yes, we are all progressing. Of course, I can say women have to be smarter than men, even though we say equal opportunities, because when there are 100 men and there are only 5 women in the industry to grow up, the 5 women have to outbeat the 95 men to be on the top, which is still happening. Young girls are very smart. But let us just look at Tamil Nadu as an example, right? I don't know how many of you went through the recent budgets. It's extremely women-focused. Yeah. And for the first time, there are incentives given for the young girls who are in grade 6 to grade 12, if I'm not wrong, right? It's a great move. But what I would request right now is, much of the women who are extremely intelligent and engineers and professionals are not in urban cities. They're in the smaller towns, and they're not employed. So as a result of which, we are looking at the top, but we are not looking at the middle of the pyramid. Right. That has to come from these smaller towns. Pandemic has been a phenomenal driver for women to embrace technology and accelerate their jobs. So my view is, I do believe that the governments should start focusing and helping companies to get more women to start working from the small towns using technology. So the adoption of technology should get higher. And rather than just focusing on what is the percentage of men and women in the company, I think we should look at how many of the women are actually delivering services from their own homes in their smaller towns without migrating to cities.
But Nupur, let's talk to you about your experience so far. And as CEO today, one of the few women CEOs heading a technology corporation today, heading a technology company today, do you believe that aids the aspiration of many other women who look at you as a role model and say, if you've been able to do that, so can they?
Yeah, absolutely. Shireen, thanks for asking me the question. And thank you for you, Majan, to actually bring up this conversation, because the conversations are needed for us to focus on the issue and find solutions together. I was part of the minority in my engineering college as one of the 8% women. And that ratio has changed substantially over the years. So we're doing something right in adopting and encouraging more and more women to be part of STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. However, we're doing enough for skilling them. We're doing enough to encourage them to participate. However, we need to also support them as they keep across various life stages dropping out of the formal workforce. And that is one of the focus areas that we at NPCI are indeed focusing on. So it really starts with encouraging them to participate. It starts from the top, where the CEOs, the MDs, the chairman, the board itself has to focus on diversity targets and bring more and more people, more and more women into the workforce. We are carrying a target of 50% ourselves. We indeed believe in equal representation, because guess what? Our customers are also equally represented. So it makes sense to do that. We are deliberately trying to focus on removing unconscious and conscious bias during the hiring stage itself, by ensuring that there's one woman candidate applying for every position that we recruit for. Also, we're doing a lot of diversity and inclusion training for our hiring managers, so that their biases during promotion processes can be removed. We have to ensure not just intake and inflow of women in technology, but also have to support them through professional guidance, through coaching, mentorship, and trainings, so that they indeed feel empowered to grow in the organization. Apart from that, elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about is the pay disparity that indeed exists. There's global, noting of women earning as low as 40% compared to their male colleagues in similar jobs. These are some of the things that we have to consciously work and, ensure that we take care of it. And like Shireen and Srimati already mentioned, pandemic has been a great opportunity for us to appreciate a hybrid work culture. We have gone out of our way to support women so that they can continue working with us in all the safety that we can provide as an organization.
In your experience, what has worked in Israel? I mean, you've got a large, flourishing startup ecosystem there as well. Men, of course, continue to be the majority, even as far as Israel's startup ecosystem is concerned. But what are some of the lessons learned? How are you trying to channel and bring in more women across the workforce?
Thank you. One, I have to say I'm so fortunate to be on this panel. I told you this earlier. I'm trying to find my place here. But you said a lot of good things, and I won't repeat. I just want to say 3 small points in continuation to what you said, the points you touched. In Israel, we also saw that though the number of women in academics and universities was increasing, there was no increase in the number of women going to engineering schools, or especially engineering, but also MBAs. And people are like, get women here, get women here. Yeah. But they realized, it took them a while, that it's not, you can't go to an 18-year-old woman or a 20-year-old woman and tell her, oh, go to engineering school, if you didn't lay the groundwork for STEM for her during even the primary school years, and of course also secondary and high school years. So they've started programs to get girls into STEM as early as 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, but also for teachers, because it was found that in math class, the teachers, and you're talking about unconscious bias, even though most of the teachers are women, they would call more on the boys during math class or during science class, and less on the girls. So we're seeing the results slowly, but you can't, as I said, a woman won't pass the entrance exam to engineering school if she doesn't have the foundation during her early education as well. So we're working on that.
But Srimati, on that point, and I know that this is something that you've experienced, walking into a room full of men in a sari, where you've always been asked, at least at the start of your career, where's your manager? Are you still asked that question?
Yeah, at least not now. I think the age shows, so they don't ask for the manager. And the manager has to be male, right, most of the time. I think that kind of conscious or unconscious bias is slowly going away, especially in India. But what's most interesting is there are certain still perceptions running as to who has to do what kind of job roles. I think unconscious bias or conscious bias, the change has to happen in our homes first. If the dads, the fathers at home can actually help us to transform that and start doing things which otherwise are constituted to be the mother's job at home.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of bias that will change.
I wish Indra was actually here in person, because I had the opportunity to speak with her when she launched her book, and there's a very interesting anecdote that she shared, that the day that she was actually appointed as the CEO of PepsiCo, she went back home and her mother was there, and she said, oh, you know, I've just been appointed the CEO of PepsiCo. And her mother said, well, all of that is fine, but you know, there's no milk in the fridge, so can you please go out there and get it? So I think the point that you're making is absolutely right. The disproportionate burden of care, child care, geriatric care, all of that, and of course just running the household continues to be on the women, and I think we need to make that shift. But Nupur, you know, one of the big issues that we are seeing today is that even though we've increased the pipeline of women being educated and coming to the workforce, CNBC-TV18 and FICCI did this first survey, and we surveyed over 80 companies in the manufacturing and the services space, and what we found was that the attrition rate of women in the 20 to 30-year-old category was the highest at over 15%. So that leaky pipe continues to leak. Now, what do you do to try and stem the leak, Nupur?
I think some of the points are already made, that if you are able to instill that ambition and drive in young girls to actually embrace and be financially independent, that is a good starting point, right? But that would not be enough, because like Srimati rightly pointed out, the fathers also need to ensure that there's no discrimination at house, whether he and
not just the fathers, the mothers also need to ensure that there is no discrimination. It's very often the mothers who will say that, okay, the boys don't need to do anything, but the girls do.
So Shireen, let me just probably talk about my own house. I come from a place where my mother has been my hero and my supermodel, and she was an IS Allied Services officer, retired now. She ensured that there was equal focus on education between me and my brother, and the life skills were equally taught to both of us, be it driving, be it swimming, be it cooking, right? When you come from that kind of a household, that is a privilege in itself.
Yes.
But what also happens on account of that is that for me, being financially independent is an imperative. And I grew up with dreams saying I can be whatever I want to be, right? So if that is taken care of, now I will say something slightly controversial, but I love talking about it. I feel that one of the most important career choices that a woman makes is who she marries, right? If you get a partner who's equally invested in your growth, your vision, your dreams, then I think half of the battle is won. And from there on the equal responsibility, the sharing of workload is taken care of, because the period that we're talking about, women leaving the workforce, age between 20 to 30, is exactly the years where they get married, life happens, they have children, and at that point of time, it becomes very, very difficult to come back unless you have a support system in place. And which is why, as an organization, it is also our responsibility to ensure there's a creche around that you can possibly pay for. Maybe you can support a nanny care. That is something that we are indeed doing. So if an organization is able to support the woman during a lot of these life stages, I think there's no reason why they would want to stay back and drop off.
Take us through the examples from Israel on what has worked, because sometimes some of these policies can also have a counter impact.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you. It needs to start in the home, right? The woman needs, or the young girl, woman needs to grow up with the ambition and the knowledge she can do it. It definitely needs, the workplaces themselves need to be able to give her the support system she needs. Sometimes it's a little difficult without a government policy because the company doesn't want to at times spend money, and it does cost money to offer a creche or give incentives for women to take a nanny and then come back to work. So we do see the moves, but the government has to be there in order to mandate things. In Israel, we still don't have 6 months of maternity leave. We have 3 months paid, and then she can take another 3 months, he or she, sorry, it's now for both mother and father. One of them can take an additional 3 months, but without pay. But obviously, and we see other countries, we see the States, we see other countries, when it's not mandated by the governments, companies or businesses that aim to make money aren't going to give it freely of their own volition.
Most of the time we talk about bridging the divide only at the entry level. No, I think we need to have a lot of focus on reskilling and getting women back in IT, because if you look at the attrition, and the highest attrition is among the women in the early 30s. And they go in with like 8 to 10 years of significant tech experience. So just skilling them a bit, because if you really have listened to Mr. Lakshmi Narayan's conversation a little earlier, every day the technology is changing.
Yeah.
So the women need to reinvent more than men, especially when she takes a career break. So I think there must be a separate focus, a single-minded focus between the government and the corporates to have a skilling body only for women who want to get back to work. That way you will find 65% of the women living in the smaller towns will embrace technology and start contributing towards the economy.
But Srimati, I want to get each one of you to address this issue, since we're talking about technology and we're talking about an acknowledged fact that there is a conscious and an unconscious bias that often works against women or against diversity, but more so women in the workforce. What is the role that technology can play to deal with that? Can artificial intelligence deal with this problem?
90% of the people, whoever goes for automation, prefers a female voice more than male voice. But many times the conversation is about whether this girl wants to be single or what is your preference and stuff like that, right? So, yes, technology is gender agnostic, but how people are using technology, I still find that there is going to be there are certain unconscious biases in a very big way. Take, for example, we are talking about IT, but we just forget about engineering industry, which is an integral part of the ICT. You will still find like 12 to 13% only are women, especially who could embrace digital engineering, who could work in circuit branches, the VLSI, digital, going into the shop floors and doing design. I think we have a long way to go.
In your experience, what has been the hardest thing to navigate as you've moved up a leadership role?
So I think goes without saying, Shireen, that the hardest thing to navigate has indeed been the discrimination and the biases, right? Some of them have been unconscious, some of them have been conscious. So for example, when I was on my maternity way, I was passed up a promotion, right? But I did not let that come in the way of being where I want to. And I think which is the reason why I force my team members who are male colleagues whose wife is going into maternity to actually take leave. I force them into leave and say that we will take care of everything else. You ensure that you are doing your role. So the most difficult would be there have been men in the leadership positions for ages. They have to really embrace the change that women are bringing in, as long as they can do it. And technology will definitely play a role, because representation definitely matters in the AI algorithms, ML algorithms that are currently being created from all the content that has been written by men, right? So we have to ensure that we play our part, we make our voices heard. And in order to do that, the challenge will be men who are not willing to embrace what we bring to the table.
Well, Srimati, Nupur and Council General, thank you so much for showing us your strength and for sharing your stories here with us at Imagine in Chennai.